I want to thank you for joining me on the Perry Stone YouTube channel. Would you please subscribe and help us to reach more people with these teachings that we do usually a couple times a week. My voice is just a little raspy, and I want you to bear with me. I've had an 8-day sinus infection that's slowly beginning to break, but it has affected my vocal cords from coughing so much. It's not COVID, by the way. It's not that. It's just one of those change of the weather times. Prophetic wars that are on the horizon. I'm going to make a statement based on the Old Testament and New Testament history, both secular history, early Roman Empire history, Greek history, Babylonian history, etc. That most of the time when God is about to transition the earth and realign the nations, it is always done through some type of a conflict, and usually it is done through war. In Egypt, the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea and God drowned Pharaoh's army, which shifted the power of the Egyptian empire. Then you have the Assyrians, and the Assyrians were destroyed by the Babylonians. You had the Babylonians, they were overtaken in a war by the Medes and Persians. You had the Medes and Persians, they were overtaken in a war or a series of wars by Alexander the Great and the Greeks. The Grecian Empire eventually began to fade as the Imperial Roman Empire, the Roman Republic, came into position. And the Roman Empire was eventually overtaken by 10 Germanic tribes. And we could go on and on. We can show you through history that when there is going to be a major earthly transition, it will be done through war. And someone said, why is that so? Because world leaders, by and large, are not believers. They are not people today who believe in the Bible. They were at one time in some nations, but not now. And so God cannot speak to them or reveal to them what to do because they are not listening to the Almighty. They are listening to military advisors, political pundits, political advisors. So they make their decisions on what might be popular or not be popular. And then you have the issue with dictators. Hitler would be considered a dictator. Nero was a dictator. Mussolini was considered an Italian dictator. Saddam Hussein was considered a dictator. So you have dictators ruling either nations or regions of the world. And as they begin to rule, there's a lot of murder, slayings, torture, money laundering, and things that go on as a result of them being in charge. But let me show you something interesting. When you come to the last days, the time of the end, and the seasons of the birth pains, what you will discover is most of the wars of prophecy are going to be linked with the nation of Israel in some way. Now, the war with Russia and the Ukraine is not necessarily linked to Israel, but as you know, there's sanctions on Russia, and the Israelis have a major gas field where some of the folks in Europe are getting their gas, natural gas, not oil, but natural gas from Israel. So, going back to this thought, let's go back to World War I. In World War I, the British had run out of gunpowder, and there was a Jewish chemist, and he invented we would call it a substitute for the gunpowder. The British won the war. Lord Balfour in England asked him, what can we do for you? And he said, I would like to have part of Palestine partitioned for a homeland for my people. And that's when the Balfour Declaration came into existence, allowing the Jews, if they would like, to go back to Palestine. Of course, at that time, it was a swamp and a desert. There wasn't a lot of people wanting to leave Europe and the jewelry industry and the fur industry and the clothing industry to go back to this desert, so to speak. However, after the Holocaust, a war, 6 million Jews perished during the Holocaust. What happened? Then Harry Truman and the United Nations, all the world governments working together, gave the Jews a homeland in Palestine that David Ben-Gurion proclaimed as the nation of Israel. And that fulfilled a lot of Bible prophecy we don't have time to get into. But in other words, it was a war, major war, that enabled the Jews to come back to Palestine and reform Israel. So you have World War I. At the end of that, there was a section of it that dealt with Israel, the Balfour Declaration. 1948, after World War II, it definitely had a dealing with Israel. Then there was a 6-day war in 1967, where several Arab nations preempted a strike against Israel, but Israel ended up winning, taking the Negev desert all the way almost toward Cairo. And they also took the West Bank, and they took the Golden Heights, all that area there. And by the way, a lot of that was ancient Israel in the time of Abraham, or time of David, actually, during the kingdom of David. So at the end of the 6 Day War, what happens? They get land back in Israel, and the city of Jerusalem, which was divided down the middle, became the capital of Israel. Now, when we talk about prophetic wars that are coming in the future, there's no question that there's going to be, there could be a war with China and Taiwan. There could be a war between North and South Korea. Now, these are places where are hotspots right now. That's why I'm saying there could be, not predicting there will be, but there could be. There could be several wars break out in different parts of Europe and especially the Middle East with Iran versus, the Saudis, whatever. I mean, there's always this possibility that you wake up one morning and there's another war going on somewhere, because Jesus said in Matthew 24, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. But this is what I want to tell you, which is very, very significant, that the war in Russia and Ukraine has opened the door for Jewish people to leave the North Country. Now, this is a great prophecy in Jeremiah 16:15, Isaiah 43, 1-9, where the Jews would come back from the North Country, and north of Jerusalem is that territory. You've got Moscow, and that's north. But the Jews are coming back to Israel to make Aliyah, or to return to their homeland. So that opened up the door. Some of the wars have opened up the door for the Jews to return for the past 25 or 30 years at least. That's the fourth point that I want to make, or third point. The big war that's coming is the war of Gog of Magog. It's Ezekiel chapter 38 and chapter 39. And it mentions there Persia, which is Iran. It mentions Libya. We know where that's at. It mentions Ethiopia. And it says Togarmah and all of those out of the north quarters. Now, if you will go on a map and you will look at where Jerusalem is, in fact, bring a map up on this and show all those nations that are north of Israel, you'll discover that Turkey, which is a very strong Islamic nation, is north. You got, we'll just look at the map. You got Russia, you got all these countries that some of them, especially let's say in southern Russia, which are predominantly Islamic nations that used to be a part of the Ottoman Turkish Empire, these are nations that are a part of the possible alignment of Gog of Magog, which is a war which has not yet happened, but a war which is going to happen in the future. So when you see, as Jesus said, the wars and the rumors of wars, I believe that the majority of major wars that will come will be among the Gentile nations. However, the biggest prophetic war coming will involve Gentile nations that are predominantly Islamic in nature, that will form a coalition against the mountains of Israel. The two biggest parts of the battle is the Golden Heights, called the Bashan in Ezekiel, and that's the border of Lebanon and Syria. And then on the Valley of the Passengers on the east of the sea, there'll be a great slaughter. That's in the country of Jordan, right across from the Jordan River, actually across from the northern part of the Dead Sea. And that whole mountain ridge through there is a part of a mountain that forms what was called the Avarim Mountains, the Valley of the Passengers. So in the future, there will be prophetic wars that will be aligned against that will occur in the Middle East. And the wars of the Antichrist are going to be taking over Egypt, Libya, and Ethiopia in the future. Those will fall to the Antichrist. Then there will be wars, according to the Bible, that will be in Lebanon and Syria. Damascus is totally destroyed in the book of Isaiah. And then there will be wars that will include what we call the Mediterranean area, which will be the area of the 10 kings where the Antichrist will rule. So it's important that if you love the prophetic word and you love prophecy, to kind of follow the times and see what's happening. Now, Jesus said this, though, to his disciples: let not your heart be troubled. He said, when you see these things happening, it's the beginning of the birth pains. So for those of us who follow Christ and really try to do the right thing and follow the Word of God, there's nothing bad in our future. Now, there may be some bad things happening on the earth that you have to endure, persecution you have to deal with, slander, lies, all the mess that the devil tries to do through his crowd. There's all this stuff is going to happen all over the place in the last days. You have to endure it to the end, Jesus said. But it's also important to understand the alignment of coalitions and the alignment of nations, because this makes us aware of how close we are toward the climax of the fulfillment of the time of the end. So when you see the wars and rumors of wars, Jesus said, don't be troubled. The end is not yet. In Matthew, he says this, but the end is coming soon. Now, the end will be the end of the dispensation of the grace of God, the dispensation of the church age that ends with the return of Christ for the church, and then the tribulation period the world will enter into. So this was a teaching I just felt inspired to share with you, give you something to think about. But please, sometimes there'll be a little commercial right after I speak, but keep watching, because I have something I would really like to get into your hands, make available to you. And I want to say also that I appreciate all the prayers and also your support for the work of God through Voice of Evangelism, 46 years of ministry. It's not been easy. It's been hard work along the way, but a lot of joy in many, many people who have come to know the Lord and people that are still coming to know the Lord. And the prophetic word is one way that you can reach the hearts of people. Thank you for your time. Keep watching. God bless you. I heard this many times on Saturday afternoon. I have never missed a main event in many years, and this week's services were the greatest revelation of God's Word yet. Personally, the morning services released the most profound, right now, practical series of revelations that I've actually ever heard in my 46 years of ministry. The 5 messages that I preached were all new insights.
This YouTube content, there's an important website you should know about, perrystone.org. Perrystone.org is an essential resource for the latest books, audiovisual presentations, and digital products from Perry Stone Ministries. Resources that cover the same kinds of topics discussed in the program you just watched. Stop in and see all that's available at perrystone.org.